Hi, it's Chris Watkin here, and I'm with Steve Carroll, who is Director of Industry Relations to REA in Australia, which is the Rightmove equivalent. And Steve, your job is to go around the world finding out exactly what the best firms are doing with Google and Starbucks and Boeing and all the other firms, and bring it back to Australian agents so they can learn to be better agents. Today, you specifically would like to talk about leadership of running an estate agency in the 2020s and beyond in this digital age. And I know you've got some very strong thoughts on this, retaining staff, attracting staff, because let's be honest, we're in a people business. So talk to me.
Yeah, no, very interesting. Good to be here. Look, I think a lot of leaders are going to really struggle in the next decade, 2020 and beyond. And the reason they're going to struggle is they're not in tune with the millennial workforce. Now, the millennial workforce in Australia will be 50% of workers in Australia in 2020 will be millennials. Now, the thing about millennials, Chris, is they are computer literate. They've grown up with computers, and computers have wired their expectations, yeah? And you and I have talked about this before. If you think about Uber, yeah, we expect things really, really fast. And one of the things that I've been doing in Australia for realestate.com.au is talking to leaders across Australia on how they can change, adapt, embrace, yeah, the new world. So number one, they can keep hold of their good staff, and number two, they can attract good staff to them.
How do they do that? Because let's be frank, millennials, all they're interested in is free food, avocado on toast, and beanbags. Well, that's what they are in the UK. Is it the same in Oz?
Hey, look, I think that's harsh. I mean, yes, to a point.
I know you
are. I know you are. I think that millennials are probably the smartest generation to join the workforce ever. Yeah, they're computer literate, they're creative, they're innovative, but they have amazingly high expectations.
Do they have, is that a values thing? Do you think they have different values?
Well, I think they have different values and different expectations driven by technology. So I'll give you a quick example. So it is not unusual. So I've got 3 teenage children. They are used to having Apple produce a phone. 12 months later, the phone is improved. 12 months after that, the phone is improved again. Yeah. So they're used to companies like Apple that innovate, improve, move at speed. Yeah. So if they're working for a company that doesn't innovate, that just stays the same, they get frustrated and then they start looking for another job. Now, this is an interesting fact for you. So I'm nearly 55 years of age. I've only worked for 3 companies in my life. I've worked for EMAP in the UK, I've worked for News Corp and REA in Australia, 3, yeah? The average millennial, by the time they retire, would have had close to 20 jobs, yeah? And 5 different careers, yeah? Now think about that, 20 different jobs and 5 different careers. And there's a number of reasons for that, but one of the reasons is they will not tolerate leaders, they will not tolerate companies that are not moving with the times.
Is it just that? I mean, what else has technology done for these, if we can take the millennials, in terms of the relationship they have with their bosses?
Well, I think what technology has done, Chris, is given them access to some of the world's best leaders. So, for example, my 20-year-old son, who goes to one of the best universities in Australia, he's a smart guy, yeah? So he's going to offer a lot to a company when he comes into the workforce. He will tell me that he has a relationship with Barack Obama through Twitter, through Instagram, through social media. He has a relationship with Donald Trump. He has a relationship with some of the most powerful leaders on the planet, because what social media has done, Chris, is opened up the communication channels.
Yeah, but if you text these people, they never text you back. Or is it psychological that you perceive that you have a relationship?
Spot on. It's psychological. So you'll get world leaders saying, this is what's going on in my world at the moment. This is what is making me happy. This is what's making me sad. Yeah. So they share that through their social media platforms to people like my son Oliver, yeah. So my son Oliver expects to have access to his bosses. Make sense? So if you have access to some of these leaders through channels like Twitter, as we've just described, and then you have a boss who you never can see because he's always got his door closed, can you see the disconnect?
Well, in the UK, you're lucky if you get a quarterly magazine. I'm talking these big firms here.
Well, this is the challenge for leaders as we so being visible, being accessible is going to be a key trait for leaders in the next
That's
decade.
good. I mean, okay, if we're talking about estate agents here, most estate agency bosses of the bigger firms are going to be very dominant in their style.
Yeah.
They're going to be quite organised, big picture, can't be dealing with the minutiae of things.
Yeah.
This really is counterintuitive to the agents I know.
Well, if we're talking about leadership, I have this belief, Chris. I believe that leaders need to seriously look at the changing demographic of the workforce and need to adapt accordingly, because different generations of workers have different expectations, and you as a leader need to adapt and move with that.
You see, I would actually say in a state agency, the vast majority of employees is probably going to be over 50%.
Yeah.
Because we are dealing with negotiators, those guys on the front line, the office people, and the valuers. I mean, I think millennials are around below age 35. Just about every single negotiator is going to be a millennial nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're telling me that the bosses out there, you know, your Robert Scott Lees of Chancellors and your big guys of Foxtons and Countrywide need to almost be putting their heart on their sleeves and communicating what soft stuff.
So what I'm saying is they need to be aware that millennials' expectations from companies and leaders will be different to the expectations of Gen X, baby boomers and so on and so forth.
See, when I were a lad and valuing, basically it was all of, you had a shitty boss, that's a technical term,
Yeah.
and all it was money, commission and car,
Yeah.
and you just dealt with it. You're telling me these millennials expect there to be in communication with their bosses via Twitter and their bosses telling them...
No, I'm not saying, right, so the fundamentals, a car, decent salary, etc., they haven't changed, right? In your days and my days, having a shitty boss, as long as the fundamentals are there, we'd put up with a shitty boss. What I'm saying is millennials won't put up with a shitty boss, even if the fundamentals are right. Now, I'm not saying that the leaders need to be on Twitter. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is what social media platforms like YouTube and Facebook have done is they've opened up accessibility, yeah? And therefore, as a leader in the next decade, you have to be accessible. Because if you're not accessible...
Or perceived to be accessible.
Perceived to be. Now,
okay, what does that look like?
Well, I mean, look, one of the best bosses that I ever worked for, bizarrely, was down here in Peterborough. Yeah, one of the best bosses. He would every single morning say to his PA, no appointments until 9:30. I don't want any meetings until 9:30. He would walk the floor between 8:30 and 9:30 religiously, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. That's what I mean about being accessible.
Okay, what about someone who runs a network of branches?
Well, again, look, I was at Facebook last year. So Zuckerberg, right, he probably is one of the busiest guys on the planet, yeah? He has every single Friday afternoon a town hall, which basically, if you're in head office, you go to a particular warehouse and Zuckerberg stands up and says, right, what do you want to know? This is what I've been doing this week, yeah? Across the world, Facebook in London, Facebook in other time zones can either in real time dial in or they can watch it in their own time. Yeah. So, you know, he leads one of the biggest companies in the world. Every single person who works at Facebook, let's be honest with you, will be a millennial. Yeah. And he knows that if he wants to keep his best staff, because they'll be tempted to go and work for Google, they'll be tempted to go and work for Microsoft. He knows that he has to be accessible. He has to say, what do you want to know? This is what I've been working on this week.
So you could almost have a Facebook, as a boss, a Facebook Live and wait for people to chuck stuff in.
Yeah, well, whatever. But
I'm trying to come up with solutions here. You know what I mean?
yeah, no, and that's good. So what I've been saying to leaders across Australia, and look, some of them will think, oh, bullshit, don't need to take any notice of that, and some of them will be interested. What I say is, look, focus on accessibility, focus on personalisation, yeah?
Yeah.
Have a relationship that is a personalised relationship, because we know companies like YouTube and Facebook, they've upped the level.
You go to Amazon and it almost mind meets. It says other people have bought this. You go, wow, I really want one of those.
That's right. So imagine having a boss who doesn't even know how many children you've got, doesn't even know what's going on in your world, and so on and so forth. There's that personalisation disconnect. Yeah.
So bosses have almost got to get to know their staff. They don't necessarily have to meet them, just cyber know them.
Well, the three things I talk about is accessibility.
Yes.
Yeah. So accessibility has gone up through the roof because millennials are getting that in bucket loads from tech companies. We've talked about that. We've talked about personalisation. The other really interesting thing is what we know at realestate.com.au is in the olden days, if somebody was coming for an interview with Steve Carroll, in the olden days, they'd rock up and...
What was the olden days? 2010.
Yeah. 2010. So 2010, if someone was coming for an interview at REA with Steve Carroll, they would rock up, they would have no expectations, they would not know who I was from Adam. What we know is there's more and more employees Googling Steve Carroll, Googling REA, and making a decision whether or not this is the type of boss that I want to work for. Is this the sort of company?
This is the digital interview you talked about.
It is the digital interview, but it's a digital interview from an employee's point of view. Yeah. And so what I encourage leaders to do is I encourage them to say, here's an exercise for you. Google yourself, right? Google yourself, Google your company. Do you give a digital impression that you're a great company to work for? Yeah?
So I agree with you, mate.
Okay, and so we've done a little bit more, well, I've done a little bit more work. I've tapped into some connections I've got at LinkedIn and various other recruitment companies. And so I've said, I've taken it one stage further. I said, okay, so imagine that somebody's Googling realestate.com.au or Googling Steve Carroll because they're thinking about offering their talent to me, yeah? And that in itself...
Would you even say that let's just say you are the CEO of a big firm, like, I don't know, Spicer Hart with over 150 branches.
Yeah.
Would someone Google the CEO first before they even did the...
Yeah, well, they would definitely definitely Google him because the CEO sets the culture.
Yes.
He creates the working culture.
Okay.
And so what we know is when talent Googles a company or an individual, there's four things that are very, very important to millennials, yeah? One is, does this CEO, does this Steve Carroll bloke, does this company look as though they're digitally switched on? Are they a company that are moving with the times, or are they a company that are stuck in the dark day? Number one. Number two, does this company give an impression that they will grow me as an individual? Because for goodness sake, I've just spent 3 years at bloody university. I now want to work for a company and a leader that's going to grow me. That's the second thing. Third thing is this a company that actually cares about community, cares about others? Because one of the traits of millennials, and we had a bit of a joke earlier on about the downsides of millennials, but one of the things they care about is the community, is the environment, and what we know is they want to work for companies that care about others. That they're quite happy if they make lots of money, but
as long as they're doing it whilst caring.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people will criticise REA for the money it makes, which is why we if you were to Google REA, you'll see that we do a lot in the community space. But one of the reasons we do that is for what I'm expecting. And the other thing, I was just actually having a look as we were waiting to be interviewed. So in the tech space, there's an app called Glassdoor. Yeah, you should check out Glassdoor. Glassdoor is an app where workers, either current workers or ex-workers, can rate the company, right, that they've worked for, right? Think about that. Think about what's the travel one? TripAdvisor. So think about TripAdvisor, but for companies in the context of working for them. Yeah. And as we move into the next decade, believe me, those 4 things on your digital footprint are really, really important.
Steve, that's been absolutely fascinating. Thanks very much, mate.
Good idea, Nick.
Cheers.